In April, I got to take an incredible trip to Kenya with Nomadness Travel Tribe and Intrepid Travel as part of their BIPOC mentorship program for travel digital storytellers. It was such an amazing experience, and if you haven't seen the vlog yet, pause this video and go watch that first. Grab your favorite drink, grab your favorite snack, because it is a really good vlog, if I do say so myself. But hi, if you're new here, my name is Sojourner, and if you're not, welcome back, babes. I'm happy to have you here. I'm normally a solo train traveler, but I opted for a group trip because when you win a competition to go on a free trip to Kenya, who am I to say no? So I'm super pumped to tell you all my tips, tricks, and advice if you are also planning a trip to Kenya soon. And I have my handy dandy notes on my iPad that I was taking throughout the entire experience to help you out. And one of the first things you should know about planning a trip to Kenya is that there is a lot of pre-travel prep. So first, if you're coming from the US, you will need a visa. And this is actually a pretty smooth process compared to other experiences I've had getting a visa, but it's 100% online. It's about $75 and it's called Sherpa. And you go in, put in all your information, and it comes back to you electronically. And I recommend that you print it out to have a physical copy. You also need to check which vaccines you'll need. So the Intrepid Travel team actually notified us that we needed to get a yellow fever vaccine, which is about $300, but it is necessary, and I went to a Passport Health Clinic in order to get my vaccine. I also got some malaria pills, which are also highly recommended if you're going to Kenya, and they give you a list of other ones like the cholera and polio and some others you can consider but aren't necessarily required for visiting Kenya specifically. I also recommend getting some of the travel diarrhea pills just in case, because you never know how your stomach is going to react. For the yellow fever vaccine, you only have to get it once, so it's one $300 investment, which is more than enough for a vaccine. And make sure you have both your printed visa and also your yellow fever papers in order to get into Kenya. As far as logistics, I flew American Airlines from Milwaukee to Chicago, Chicago to London, then London to Nairobi. So it really depends on what airline you prefer, but the main airport is the Nairobi airport. The Chicago to London leg was about 6 hours long, and London to Nairobi was about 9 hours. So it is a pretty decently long flight. So you want to make sure you have all of your travel goodies like your noise canceling headphones, a neck pillow, socks, whatever you need to be comfortable, because you will be sitting for a very long time. And I also recommend that you break up your trip. So don't do a 13-hour flight there. I mean, if that's the cheapest one, go for it, but I prefer long haul flights that are broken up into two smaller legs, so I get a little bit of a break from being on the plane. And our flights, I think, were around $2,000. We booked them a little later than I would normally have had I done it on my own. So I recommend that you book as soon as possible, because flights are definitely not cheap getting from the US to Kenya. As far as traveling within Kenya, I was with Intrepid Travel, so they had drivers for us the entire time. There was a shuttle that came to pick us up from the airport once we arrived. And the first day we didn't have any drivers, and I used Uber with a few of my fellow travelers, and it was really smooth. So Uber does work in Kenya if you didn't want to rent a car, because traffic can be so busy. So you may not want to risk driving if you're uncomfortable driving in countries that are not your own. But the drivers were with us the entire time on our safaris at Lake Nakuru National Park and Masai Mara National Reserve, going to the villages, and any other driving we did in between during the 7-day trip. We also took a local bus, which you all told me in the comments of my vlog that it wasn't the best one. So I don't know much about which bus is the best bus, but they do have buses in Nairobi that you're able to use as well. But if you do know, let the folks know in the comments what buses they should be looking out for, because apparently the one I took was old. I don't know. High season or peak season is between June and October, and June to July is when a lot of people go to see the wildebeest migration. I know people mentioned that in my Kenya vlog as well in the comments, but to get a bit cheaper experience, you may want to consider going in the wet season between March and May. We went in April and it was relatively fine. I will say that when we left, there was a lot of devastating flooding, and there was a little point in the vlog where we didn't know know if we would leave Masai Mara, so it is a bit of a risk, especially with climate change, that you may not want to travel in wet season. So a good time to go is shoulder season, and for Kenya, that is January, February, November, and December. So you may want to look into flights during that time. And shoulder season is great because it's the season between peak season, meaning it's not as many people, but also not as wet and not as empty as it may be for tourists during the wet season. As far as packing, this is going to depend on what time of year you go. I went at the end of April, and so it was a mix. It wasn't super hot, but it wasn't super cold either. Coming from Wisconsin, there aren't many places that I think are cold to me, and Kenya is definitely not one of them. I just recommend packing some layers because when you're going on the game drives in the morning of the safari, it can be a bit chilly. So bringing a light sweater or a light jacket or even a rain jacket if you're going in the rainy season is something I would recommend you do. I do not have a rainy jacket, and I probably should have for this trip. As far as safari clothing, it's very popular and common to wear that utility green color. I had some khakis like that. I had a jumpsuit like that. I also had some cream khakis or some brown khakis. So those are the kinds of things you may want to wear, more of those neutral colors. I bought a hat while I was there, which makes for a great souvenir if you want to wait until you get to Kenya, because they will be selling them in the gift shops in the hotels. As far as backpacks or day packs, Intrepid did give us a little backpack that turned into a tote, and I thought that was really cute, very convenient, but I recommend bringing something, maybe a fanny pack. I have a slightly bigger fanny pack from Eagle Creek that I really like to bring on trips like this because it's not as small as a purse and it can go across your body, so you don't have to worry about it while you're on your trip. And in your little day pack, you want to carry your malaria pills because you'll take those once a day during your trip. Also your cameras, your water bottle, whatever you want to bring, you want to put in that little bag because you'll be out on the game drives and safaris for the entire time until it's time for you to go back to your hotel. As far as accommodations in Kenya, we stayed in 3 places that I really enjoyed. The first one was the Saroba Pan Afrique Hotel. This hotel is near the CBD or the Central Business District, and I think it's a great location. It was easy access to get to everything that we wanted to get to in Nairobi. It is in the center, so it is a very big hustle bustle kind of area. So if that's the vibe you want, I recommend staying there when you're in Nairobi. As far as going to Lake Nakuru National Park, we stayed at Lake Nakuru Sopa Lodge, and I also really enjoyed that too. I thought it was beautifully decorated. It was an indoor and outdoor space. I saw the most insanely gorgeous sunrise while I was there. I think it was probably the best sunrise I have ever seen, so I highly recommend if you're putting Lake Nakuru National Park on your itinerary, you also stay at Lake Nakuru Sopa Lodge. And the last place we stayed at was Zebra Plains Mara Camp on the Masai Mara National Reserve. So Lake Nakuru Sopa Lodge definitely felt more hotel-ish than Zebra Plains Mara Camp, hence the camp part, but it's more like glamping. You're not in a tent. You have a really pretty view from your little patio, and everything is super walkable, and it does get dark at night, but they have the Masai Mara warriors who are able to walk you from place to place just to be safe because you are on the reserve itself. So it's a really cool space. I enjoyed all 3 that we had. The views were incredible. The food at all the places were also great. I really love the buffets at each place we stayed to, whether it was in Nairobi, Lake Nakuru, or Masai Mara. Each place had a very nice spread, so you would not be underfed on your trip. As far as things to do, obviously the main thing is safari. So you have a few different options. If you want to go to a smaller safari near Nairobi, I recommend Lake Nakuru National Park. It is closer than Masai Mara National Reserve, so you want to keep that in mind as you're planning your trip. But at Lake Nakuru, we saw lions, we saw zebras, we saw giraffes, we saw buffalo. You will not see elephants at this one because there are no elephants at Lake Nakuru, so that's something you should know as you're planning your trip. But you do get to see flamingos, which is pretty cool because they are attracted to the algae at the lake. So you really have to decide what you're willing to see and what you aren't willing to see on your trip. But of course, the main safari is Masai Mara National Reserve. And I feel like if you're going to Kenya, you might as well go and do a safari here. It was incredible. We saw cheetahs, we saw lions, we saw elephants, giraffes, zebras, and it was the most incredible experience. I honestly can't believe that I was there, and it's been over a month since I've been back. So if there's one that I would recommend, because it is the safari of all safaris, no matter where you are in the world, it's Myanmar National Reserve. Just book it. It's definitely worth it. It's definitely worth the experience, worth the animals you'll see, and just an incredible thing to be so close to the wildlife that they have there.
This is Editing Sojourner. I forgot to add that we did go to different villages in Kenya, which I think was great to balance out the safari experiences, because Kenya is more than just a playground for wildlife. There's a lot of culture, a lot of traditions here. So I highly recommend visiting the villages like this one. This was Helen from the Tepesua village. And we also did a hot air balloon ride and a champagne breakfast too.
Outside of the safaris, I did do a few things in Nairobi. So we did a walking tour of Nairobi to learn more about the history of the city, which I always recommend you do wherever you visit, because it's a great way to learn about a place once you arrive. However, this was not included in the tour, but I also went to Giraffe Center to go feed the giraffes, which was an experience. If you saw the vlog, you know, but it was really cool experience that you can add if you aren't going to do a safari, or you don't want to do a full safari when you go to Kenya, but you want to get a wildlife experience. I think going to Giraffe Center is really cool and really inexpensive compared to staying at Giraffe Manor, which can be upwards to $1,000. I think the Giraffe Center was only $12 when I went. And the last thing I did in Nairobi was go to Kobe Tough, which is a center for women beaders and artisans and bankers. Want to learn about the Maasai women and the beading and the artistry? I recommend going to Kobe Tough while you're in Nairobi. And I booked both of those through Intrepid Travel, but they were not part of the 7-day Travel Digital Storytellers Tour. A question that always comes up in travel planning is safety, and for the most part, I felt really safe in Nairobi, and as well as in the safaris. I feel like when you're out in the safari, there really isn't much danger unless, the lions, the big cats, etc. So I felt relatively safe. I know they did give us a little bit of caution in Nairobi with our stuff when we were walking around, make sure we always know where our things were, but to be honest, it was really smooth. I think because I was in a group, safety really wasn't an issue that I felt. So if you're traveling solo, you may feel differently, or you may need to take different precautions, but for me, I had no issues with safety, and I think our guides and our drivers did a really good job with us as far as keeping us safe on this trip. Some additional tips to know are: one, money. So most places do take card and prefer card. I did know that a lot of places actually didn't even take cash. I would say if you're going to take out cash, use it primarily to tip people. So if someone helps you with your luggage when you're coming out of the airport, they're going to ask for a tip. And I think you should tip your drivers and your guide by the end of the tour as well. So that is also really good to have cash, and they'll take dollars or shillings, whichever one you want to offer. But even when you're buying souvenirs, they have card machines, so you don't really take out a whole lot of cash if you don't want to, but if you do, I recommend just having it for tips. And speaking of tips, a tip I have is to go with a tour group. As I mentioned, I'm normally a solo traveler, but I don't think I could have planned this trip this way on my own. I think it's really cool to share a safari experience with someone else. Not saying you have to go in a group and that you can, of course, enjoy it solo, but I think as someone who travels solo, I enjoyed having people around on this trip and sharing that experience and taking photos and videos and just laughing together and singing in the car together, or the Jeeps. They weren't cars, they were full-on Jeeps. I really enjoy being in a group. I would recommend doing a group trip to Kenya if you are interested in going. I had a lot of fun. And my last thing to note is that they do speak Swahili. I wish I knew Swahili. It's one of the languages that I've always wanted to learn, but English is also spoken as well. However, your guides will probably speak both. So as far as language barriers, there really wasn't a whole lot that I experienced as an English speaker. And those are all my tips that I have for you. I hope you enjoy your trip to Kenya, and I have a full guide of all the things that I did on my trip to Kenya on my website, which I will link in the description box below, as well as a link to the trip that I did with Intrepid Travel. This was a little different because it was for Travel Digital Storytellers, but they do have a trip very similar to this on their website, their premium Kenya trip. So I will link that below as well. So yeah, thank you for watching, and as always, stay curious, and I will see you all in my next video. Bye!